This is before. Yeah, we barely get a cut here. We've got a piece of paper here, and as you saw before, it was a little dull. Let's see what we can do this time. Okay, so here's my edge of paper here. Ooh. Ooh. It's pretty sharp now. So I can just doing it that way has given us a pretty good edge here. Alright, so I'm gonna try and do a quick video on sharpening blades, sharpening a knife, and more or less regurgitating some information that I have learned from another YouTuber online. And as far as blades are concerned, they're a great tool to have. They make short work of most things in a survival situation. And on my channel, I try to focus mostly on primitive technology. Modern technology is the knife, is the blade, metal specifically. And but I think it's relevant. For now. I'm kind of blurring the lines between modern tech, modern survival, practical survival, resilient living, and Stone Age. So I think it's important to make sure that you keep a sharp edge, a sharp blade. A sharp knife is a safe knife. That's very, very true. And so I'm going to try to cover a little bit what I know about sharpening a blade. And so what I have here is I have a whetstone with a W-H-E-T spelling versus a W-E-T spelling. And I have it soaking. It's been soaking, so I can pull this out. And this this stone has a very rough edge, and it may not show up on the camera, but on this side here is very rough, and on this side here is very fine. And we're going to start out with the rough edge first, and then over here I also have a very, very, very fine block of basically ceramic for the most part, for honing really, really fine edges that's also been soaked in water. During my research on sharpening, a lot of what I've found out that a lot of people have been using is oils. This is just basically clipper oil here, or WD-40 here, and you put this right on the whetstone to kind of keep it lubricated. This is basically mineral oil, which you can get from pretty much any hardware store, if you choose to do that. But making it wet, making your sharpening or honing stone wet is just fine. So I've got a kitchen knife here that is sorely in need of some sharpening. And what I'm going to do is got a piece of paper here, and I'm going to try and cut it. This is before. Yeah, we barely get a cut here. So it needs sharpening. It's a dull edge, not very safe edge. And what we're going to do, and there's many different ways to do this, and I don't want to make this too lengthy as far as explanation, but what I want to do is basically lay this blade against the flat stone here and kind of raise it so that the edge is perfectly parallel to the stone, or at least not parallel, perpendicular to about 10 to 20 degrees. And there's many different ways to tell that. You can fold a piece of paper to get your what's that, 22.5 degrees. You can measure with your little finger. If you're adult, it should be just yay high from the base of the whetstone to the top of your finger. You can eyeball it. You can also even take a Sharpie and run it along the edge of your blade on each side, and then you'll know when you're at the right angle when you've rubbed the Sharpie away. So those are different ways to do it. Right now I'm just going to kind of focus on sort of the technique, and there's many different ways to do this. From a Japanese style standpoint, which is going to be a reference point, the Japanese method is it's really kind of straight along the edge, and you're pulling it back hard, lightly, and then pulling it back hard, and it's just going to be straight back and forth like this. But I'm going to modify that a little bit by canting the blade at an angle, and I'm going to do this back and forth motion with my the teeth, the tooth of the blade here, being at at about 22 to 22 and a half to 10 degrees of an angle, and I'm just going to be pulling it back and then pushing it forward lightly, and then pulling it back and then pulling it back, and you can kind of hear it. Now I have this towel here, and this towel is kind of wet, so it grips the surface of the table. Now as I hit the edge, I'm canting the edge of the blade up a little bit so I can make sure that I hit the tooth of the tip. And there's many different ways to do this. I mean, you can, again, this is the information age, and everybody has their own way of doing this. And some people like to push the blade into the edge, or rather, into the edge. Sometimes they like to draw it towards themselves, like that. As long as the angle of the edge is consistent, is kind of the rule of thumb. When you hit edges that are stubborn, people will do a rotating motion like this. Some people do that. Some people push and then pull it back. There's many different ways to do it. I think the means justifies the ends, if I'm saying that correctly. The means justify the ends. As long as you get your blade sharp, as sharp as you need it. Doesn't really matter. It shouldn't be a point of argument. If it makes your blade sharp, it makes your blade sharp. Whatever works. In this particular video, what I'm going to be doing is more of a modified Japanese style, which I'm going to be pulling the blade towards me, lightly pushing it forward, and putting pressure as I pull it back. And I'm going to be doing that about 5 minutes per side. So I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to be doing it this side 5 minutes, for a total of 20 minutes each time for the whole session. But what I'm going to start out first of all is with a rough grit, and then I'm going to switch over to a lighter grit, and then I'm going to switch over to a fine grit. Okay? So we're going to see how sharp we can get this blade, and all I'm going to do is just pull it towards me. At the same angle. You can feel, and what's going to happen is that a burr is going to form, and you can kind of feel it. It's kind of sharp here to my touch, but that's just the rough grit here. And I tend to favor one side, so I'm gonna. And you can put a timer on, and just draw back on one side for 5 minutes, and then change the timer, and do the same thing for the other side. So now I'm going to switch it over to the finer grit, and it'll be the same thing. I'm going to do 5 minutes each side, like so. Keeping the edge, keeping the angle consistent throughout this pulling and pushing process is the key. And then as you get to the tip, you might have to angle the tip up a little bit, so that, and then inward, so that you make sure that you get the tip in. So we've used the fine grit on this one, which is pretty rough, compared to this one, which is very fine grit, like 1200. I'm not sure what this is. I don't even remember where I got this block, but there again, there's a rough grit, and then there's a finer grit to the rough grit. And if we were just to use these two alone, would be just fine. But I was able to pick up this honing stone specifically for Japanese knives, and this is at 1200 grit, I believe. And so we're going to finish off again. Probably going to do 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes aside, and just the same motion. So I'm just pulling back along the body or the belly of the blade for approximately 2 minutes each side. Okay, so I'm finishing up on this very fine grit of a honing stone or whetstone, and I'm lightly pushing and drawing back with more pressure. So yeah, this put a bit of an edge in here. And what we're going to do is the final part to this is I've got a piece of leather here. This is vegetable tanned cowhide. There's a rough side or the flesh side, and there's the grain side or the smooth side. I'm going to go ahead on the smooth side, and I'm going to hone or strop my edge on the leather, like so. This will get rid of any microscopic burrs and also polish the edge. So this is what we got so far. It's a little dirty because of the shavings that we're getting. But I'm just going to strop that a couple of times and go ahead and take my towel and kind of wipe the edge of the blade off just a little bit. and then we'll see what kind of cut that we're gonna get. So we've got a piece of paper here, and as you saw before, it was a little dull. Let's see what we can do this time. Okay, so here's my edge of paper here. Ooh. Ooh. It's pretty sharp now. So I can kind of take this and get some pretty good fancy cutting in here. So just doing that way has given us a pretty good edge here. And again, I'm just gonna and then do the other side a little bit more just to touch it up after dulling it on the paper. And then I'm gonna wipe this, and I can hone it on my piece of leather here. Again, I'm doing it on the smooth side of the leather, not the rough side, or the grain side, not the flesh side of the leather. So that should give us a nice clean cut. So yeah, pretty good. So that's just a real quick and dirty tutorial on how to sharpen a blade.